Hello, everybody, and welcome to Carpet City Cinema, a Gila Films podcast. I'm David Weaver, and this week we're actually going to be playing one of the original episodes I recorded way back when I was first testing the waters of launching a podcast. And this was when I was testing out the idea of doing mini episodes where I would simply review a movie and do nothing else, and was considering the idea of using these for exclusive episodes should I ever launch a Patreon channel, and still considering that as an option in the future. But I thought that it'd be interesting to kind of play this now that was originally recorded back on, January 25th, 2022. Yeah, so about a year and a half ago. I have about, after this, I think I have like three more of these older episodes that I'm going to sprinkle throughout every once in a while. I'll pop one up on a week so that you can look at that. But remember, keep in mind, this is a year and a half old. I don't think there's too much referenced in it that would be dated. Then this episode is when I was talking about the Chuck Norris flick Hero and the Terror. So give it a listen. It's very short, comparable to the other episodes I've done, but I hope you enjoy. And to kick things off, I thought I'd talk about, devote this entire episode to a intelligent and literary discussion of the 1988 Chuck Norris vehicle, Hero and the Terror, which I saw for the first time last night. So in this movie, Norris plays Dan O'Brien, an LA cop who, 3 years prior to the main timeline of our film, was responsible for the apprehension of a notorious serial killer of women named Simon Moon, a.k.a. the Terror, who's played by Jack O'Halloran, who's probably best remembered for his role in the Christopher Reeve Superman films as Non, the hulking mute sidekick of General Zod. And following Chuck Norris's encounter with this killer, Simon Moon is incarcerated in a mental health facility, and Norris goes about his regular police activities of taking down drug dealers, but he's plagued by nightmares of his run-in with Simon Moon that he tries to deal with the help of his pregnant girlfriend, Kay, played by Bryn Thayer, who's also a psychologist in the film. But big shocker here, the Terror escapes from prison, able to steal a van, but in the process of trying to get away, the van he's in goes over a cliff and he's presumed dead. Lo and behold, though, he is not deceased, and he instead makes his way to a recently renovated and a reopened theater in downtown LA, the Wiltern Theater, where he holds up in a hidden secret room and proceeds to begin killing women again. And of course, when Norris finds out about these crimes, he quickly comes to the conclusion that Simon Moon, the Terror, is still with us. So this film came at a point in Norris's career where he was established as an action movie star. He'd been around for over a decade, but he wanted a chance to show a different side of his on-screen persona, something that was a little more character-driven and provided him with opportunities to show some dramatic, comedic flair, have some dialogue, more dialogue-driven scenes. And the film definitely shows that Norris isn't without, acting ability. I mean, that's the whole thing about why these 80s action stars are so iconic. Norris, Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Van Damme, Lundgren. I mean, they might not necessarily be Academy Award-winning performers, but they definitely had this likability, this on-screen presence, this a way with dialogue that just made them really appealing. I think in ways that, combined with their kind of, rugged action star presence, really kind of speaks to why they remain so appealing to audiences. I mean, and that's not to knock, contemporary action stars, but, to me, I see someone like a Dwayne Johnson, and, I have great respect for his work ethic and what he has achieved, but he just doesn't, to me, have that kind of natural, easygoing manner about him that a lot of these kind of earlier action stars had, nor does he have that kind of look like he's, been around the block a few times, taken a couple, hard hits in his life. So, yeah, I think even though I, I I have problems with Hero and the Terror as a film, it does succeed in showing that Norris has some range. But the problem with the movie is that it doesn't really kind of know what it wants to be. It wants to be this kind of like, character cop at home film. It wants to be a serial killer movie. It wants to be a horror movie. It wants to be a cop movie, an action film, and it doesn't succeed really at any of these. I mean, first up, a Chuck Norris vehicle, it really doesn't have a lot of action on hand. I mean, there's a scene early on where he and his cop buddies, his cop partners, played by Steve James of the American Ninja movies, and Jeffrey Kramer, who was Deputy Hendricks in the Jaws movies. They take down some drug dealers. That gives some time for Norris to show off his martial arts skills. He takes out a pre-renegade Branscombe Richmond in a fight scene. And there's obviously a climactic fight with Simon Moon, but really these kind of like action beats are really kind of spread out, and not really the best even Chuck Norris fight scenes. I mean, one of the things I like about some of Norris's earlier work, like I enjoy The Octagon, is there was less cutting in those fight scenes. It really gives because Norris was obviously a very talented martial artist, and so some of those earlier films, there was less editing. He was able to just do these single takes of him at work and really showed off his prowess. Whereas this movie, the action scenes that it does have, they rely a little bit more on cutting, which isn't to say that he's not doing the actual footwork in the movie, but it does take away from some of the the impact of a martial arts move when you cut halfway through it. So yeah, as an action film, as a Chuck Norris action vehicle, or just action vehicle, period, the actual action moments are really kind of spread out. There's definitely a lot of time to look into, Norris reckoning with his nightmares and his trauma from encountering Simon Moon. Time develops to his developing relationship with his girlfriend. And then just hunting down Simon Moon, what goes into that, finding where he's operating out of, and convincing others that he's still alive. And again, there's nothing wrong with taking time away from action, but none of this other stuff. It kind of goes to the overall problem with the movie. Okay, so we're going to take time away from action to dive into Chuck Norris's relationship with his girlfriend, but that's not overwhelmingly compelling. We're going to take time to look at the overall manhunt for Simon Moon. Again, not terribly interesting, and it's kind of drawn out. So again, it's just kind of a matter of, this film doesn't really, even though it's trying to be many things, it doesn't really succeed at any one of them. And then there's the horror aspect of it, right? Simon Moon is this serial killer, he hulking brute, who snaps women's necks, and who's supposed to be this really, obviously frightening figure. And you can tell that they definitely took some notes from the slasher genre. I mean, to the point where when Simon Moon even literally has a Jason Voorhees style musical cue when he appears. But this is also, another flaw of the movie is that, as far as I'm concerned, he's just really not that intimidating of a villain. I mean, Jack O'Halloran, he's a big dude. Obviously, he'd have no problem dealing with me in a back alley. But they depict this character of Simon Moon as basically childlike in his mind, that he has no thought process. He reacts on instinct. He just kills women. Maybe he was, abused in his past. And so he's almost played like a simpleton, like an even simpler version of Lenny from Of Mice and Men. And by this time, Halloran's still tall guy, still imposing, but he's kind of put on a little bit of a paunch there, and they have him walking around in like dirty sweatpants, and I don't know, he just comes off like this giant version of a really out of shape Matthew Perry. That's what he kind of looks like. It's like he's not just because he's tall doesn't really make him frightening. And just because you're telling us, oh, he's killing all these women, he just doesn't come off like really someone to reckon with. It's almost hard to take seriously that this is, what Norris has to go up against. So, again, taking on all these different, trying to put all these different genres into one film, all these, different things into the pot, but not really effectively managing any one of them. The cast, though, I will say that this film, like I said, Norris gives a chance for Norris to flex a little bit more of the acting muscles, but definitely props to also hit the leading lady of this movie, Bryn Thayer, who I wasn't familiar with before this. She had apparently, prior to this, probably was best known for a recurring role on One Life to Live, and just she's really good. I mean, it's one of the high points of this film is just watching her act because she's very natural. She's cute, but just really effortless. Just a believable person. And since then, I was looking up kind of what else she's done since then. She's had recurring roles on a lot of television stuff, really. Matlock and other shows, Pensacola, Wings of Gold, and still acting today. Though she, even had a recurring role on Suits, the TV show Suits, a couple years ago. But she's really one of the bright points. There's a lot of people in the movie that cult film lovers will be familiar with. Like I said before, Steve James, who was a staple at Cannon Films in the 80s, which Hero and the Terror is a Cannon film. He's there as an ill-fated police partner of Chuck Norris. Interestingly, Billy Drago shows up in a non-typical Billy Drago role. He's usually playing a villain. He had a smaller role in Chuck Norris's Invasion USA prior to this, and of course, right before this, had played Frank Nitti in Brian De Palma's The Untouchables, which is kind of one of his most iconic roles. And then after this, would play the main villain in Delta Force 2 with Norris. But he's actually cast in the movie as a psychiatrist who's overseeing Simon Moon while he's incarcerated. Not a huge part, but definitely a little more atypical for Drago. And he does good with it. Excuse me. Even though his character is an absolutely horrible psychiatrist, there's a scene where Norris is talking to him about Simon Moon and then talks to him about his own fears, and he's dealing with him basically, what do I do about, these nightmares I'm having? And Billy Drago's, response is basically along the lines of, it's never going to go away. You just got to live with it. What else are you going to do? And I'm like, that's probably not the best psychiatric advice, but hey, it works. But also, I got to give kudos to Murphy Dunn, the actor Murphy Dunn, who has a small but effective role in the movie as the manager of the movie theater where Simon Moon is holed up at. And that's it. That kind of also brings up there are some nice comic beats in this movie. If anything, it doesn't, like I said, doesn't really work in the horror. Doesn't really work too well with action. Doesn't really work too well with drama. But the few comic moments that are sprinkled throughout are actually are good. They're actually well written. There's some nice throwaway lines. Like I said, some good bits that the theater manager has. Also showing up in the movie in a really brief scene is actress Heather Blodgett, who plays a newly hired employee at the movie theater who becomes a victim of Simon Moon. She's got a nice little comic bit. And her father in real life is the former actor Michael Blodgett, who cult film fans will remember from Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. And he actually co-wrote this movie. By this time, he had gotten involved in some producing and writing in films, and so he was the co-writer on this movie, adapting it from his own novel. But this is, like I said, too, this is a Cannon film production, which we talked a little bit about in the first episode of Carpet City Cinema, Cannon Films, because we were talking about Death Wish 2 and 3. And, Cannon Films was a company that had been around since like the late 60s, but in the late 70s was taken over by the cousins Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus, who were a pair of Israeli filmmakers, and kind of became synonymous as with B-movie action of the 80s. I mean, they were the studio of Charles Bronson in the 80s, of Chuck Norris and Van Damme. They even worked, with Stallone on Over the Top and Dolph Lundgren on the Masters of the Universe film. They did the American Ninja movies, the ill-fated Superman 4. And they also had some prestigious projects mixed in there too, like, Runaway Train and Franco Zeffirelli's Otello. But eventually they kind of had an ignominious end as a result of basically overspending their money and having some films that were pretty big failures. Interestingly, Norris's first movie with them was Missing in Action, and he ended up doing a trilogy of those over at Canon, as well as films such as The Delta Force, Invasion USA, and Firewalker. And he would also star in Canon's last film, which was 1994's Hellbound. Just to kind of talk about the behind the scenes on this movie, we mentioned that Michael Blodgett co-wrote the script, the actor turned producer writer. The film was directed by William Tannen, who did a few films over the years. Probably one of the better known ones was Flashpoint with Chris Christopherson and Treat Williams, which is the kind of like the police suspense film. He also would direct Deadly Illusion. He would take over directing on that from Larry Cohen. That was the Billy D. Williams film that Cohen was fired from. And he would actually reteam with Norris to direct The Cutter in 2004, which to date is Norris's last starring vehicle. I should also mention that in the cast playing the mayor of Los Angeles is none other than Ron O'Neal, Superfly himself. And looking it up, actually, the theater where a lot of the events take place at, the Wilson, that's a real movie theater, still operating in LA, that was built in the 30s, has that Art Deco look. Now, speaking of the look of the film, another problem, a big handicap for the film is its visual presentation. That's kind of, you can have a film that's fails on many levels, but if it's, has a strong aesthetic, especially with film being, having such a visual component to it, that can really cover a multitude of sins. But this film, Tannen doesn't really direct it with a lot of cinematic flair. A lot of the shots are, a little bit too tight. Almost, I wouldn't want to say it has a full TV look to it or TV movie look, but there's definitely a lot of two shots and close-ups where you'd expect it to have kind of like more of a vista to the look of the movie. Then this is the late 80s, so the color palettes, a lot of white and pink and beige and blonde, and kind of, I'm sure there are people who love that look. Me being someone who's a fan of that late 50s to early to mid 80s, definitely doesn't find it too invigorating, but it has that that kind of like that late 80s early 90s JC Penney catalog look to it, which doesn't do much for me. And also, going back to the script, aside from the issues we already pointed out, it's just it's the level of stupidity in the movie. We kind of, again, talked about this a little bit in the first Carpet City cinema episode about, you look to a genre movie and you say, oh man, there's a lot of really, unintelligent character behavior and things going on. And some people respond, well, I just enjoy it. It's a genre movie. But my response to that is, of course, like I said then, is that, you create a world with your film, and characters have to act within that world according to the ground rules you've set. And so in this film, again, there might be some spoilers here. Simon Moon's escaped and they can't find his body, but they're presuming him dead, which, is a little bit of a problem right there. And once Chuck Norris approaches the authorities and says, Simon Moon is the person who's killing these people whose bodies are turning up. And, I believe he's operating out of this theater that's just recently been renovated. The mayor basically strong arms Norris into going to a press conference and saying, because he's afraid of copycat killers, that no, Simon Moon is dead. He's not responsible for these killings. And in exchange, what Norris wants from the mayor is permission to station a police officer at the movie theater, which ends up being Steve James, who doesn't take Norris seriously, and that Simon Moon is alive and ends up getting killed by Simon Moon. But just the idea that, so here you have, a police officer who interacted with Simon Moon telling you he's still alive. You have no proof that he's dead. You have victims who match his MO, who are being found around this central location. I don't know. You'd think maybe you'd take this police, Chuck Norris's warnings a little more seriously and actually like fully search the theater to just to check to see if maybe Simon Moon is there. If there's any signs. Now, they do this after Steve James's character is killed, and they can't find this secret room that Simon Moon is hidden in, which Chuck Norris figures out by looking at old architectural drawings. But I don't know. Do you think that again? You kind of feel like maybe the police would have turned that up uh, on their own without Chuck Norris having to go off by himself. That this guy's operating around this one area. Maybe there's and it's a really large building. Maybe there's some place in there we're not sure about where he's hiding. But even Norris's approach to the possibility of Simon Moon being in this theater is really contradictory. I mean, there's a scene where he believes strongly that Simon Moon is hiding out at this location, and he goes to check up on Steve James to make sure that he's really taking this assignment of being stationed at this theater appropriately, and he brings along his girlfriend. And they go to the theater together, and Chuck Norris says, "Oh, give me a sec while I talk to my buddy here," and the girlfriend just wanders off to use the bathroom, and then Chuck Norris freaks out because he can't find her, and it's like, well, why'd you even, if you believe the serial killer's hanging out here, why'd you even stop by with your girlfriend? It just completely doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then you find out as the film progresses that the timeline for like how long Simon Moon would have been operating out of this movie theater is something like, I think it's like 10 months, while the construction's been going on. And when Norris uncovers his lair at the end, he finds many corpses in it. There have been other victims that we hadn't seen. So again, just the idea that a very well-known Los Angeles serial killer who has been presumed dead just because his body hasn't been found is operating out of the heart of Los Angeles, in a building that's undergoing restoration work. That's the whole thing. Like, Simon Moon's supposed to be operating out of the theater while it's undergoing construction and renovation, that there'd be all these construction workers and renovation workers right around there at the time while he's, killing women and hiding their bodies there. And he's never seen, his presence is never detected. No one's noticing all these women, being murdered and killed. And, it's that kind of level of stupidity in the script where you're like, did they think about this at all? But, okay, so all this being said, it's still a 1980s Chuck Norris canon film. So if you like that, and I do like that, you're not going to have any regrets about watching this, right? I mean, it's not like you're going to walk away and be like, oh, that was a waste of my time, because even though it's not good, it's not a good movie, it's still not a painful watch to sit through. You want to kind of, you enjoy seeing even the lesser vehicles of Norris from this time, just because they have, that they demonstrate that presence that he has that is so likable. I mean, at the very least, you're going to walk away and be like, oh, okay, at least I got to see, an agreeable Chuck Norris, that charismatic side of him that, is why I like him so much. And, like I said, props to Bryn Thayer for her work in the film. And, it does its duty in terms of providing you with a supporting cast of familiar genre faces. So even though it's a movie I would not recommend to the uninitiated in terms of canon films or Chuck Norris, I would definitely say that if you like the actor, if you like that studio and that time, that it's one you want to get to eventually. It's not necessarily at the top of the pile, but you'll at least want to check it out. This film was released on Blu-ray by Kino Lorber, which that's the copy I have. Solid transfer. Only extras are a trailer for this and Chuck Norris film An Eye for an Eye, but still definitely worth grabbing. I think actually as of this time that I'm recording this, that's been added to the discontinued list of Kino Lorber titles that will not be getting renewed or reprinted once they sell out. So you might want to, if you're interested in seeing it and you want to own it on physical media, you might want to grab that when you can. So I think that pretty much covers it. Hero and the Terror, 1988 Chuck Norris film. Like I said, if you're into 80s action, if you're into canon, if you're into Chuck Norris, if you're a completist about these things, watch the film. If you're someone who's looking for a solid horror movie or solid action movie, this isn't going to be it at all. But proceed accordingly.